Hello everyone, Lawrence here, freezing my toes off in the middle of winter to talk to you about the Canyon Spectral CF. Now this is, as you can see from the awesome colors, the 2018 model. I bought this one in August and it took me until now to finally do a review on it because it's my own personal bike and there are no deadlines, so I really wanted to get a good feel for the bike. Being the 2018 model though, there are quite a few changes to the 2019 model, although the frame itself is identical. So we'll mostly be focusing on the frame, the experience, how the frame feels and the bike feels in general, rather than go over the components on this bike, because as you can maybe see, I already changed quite a few of them. So as I said, the frame is the same whether you get the 2018 or the 2019 model. My frame right here is an extra large. Now I'm 1.84 m, which means I'm actually 2 centimeters too short to ride this size frame, but it's because I want to make a bit of a point clear here. This reach is 482 millimeters on the extra large. Now for me, 480 millimeters of reach, that's kind of where I want to be. The chainstay length is 430 across the entire model range. So perhaps Canyon should really, let the chainstays grow as well. Although this is a fun trail bike, it's not a racing bike. So having those shortest possible chainstays does really make everything a lot of fun. Now what doesn't make everything a lot of fun is that you can't play with bike sizing to get the correct size reach because of this seat mast. Now I'm standing a bit lower than the bike right now, so it's maybe not as obvious, but standover clearance is incredibly good. However, the seat mast comes all the way up to here, which means being 1.84 m, this being an XL frame, my dropper post is completely slammed in there. This one has 15 centimeters of pretty slow travel when it's this cold. So this is like my perfect pedaling height, but I really can't go any lower. So just as an FYI, my inseam length is 79 centimeters. So if your inseam length is any shorter than that, do not buy the extra large frame. That said though, there are a lot of really cool things about this frame. So first of all, I have the what I would call the bitch tier carbon model. So it's carbon in the front, aluminium in the rear. Now you can also get a full-on aluminium bike, which is incredible value. They start at only 2,100 euros, or you can get a full carbon model and even a carbon fiber race model, which is like a more expensive layup. Now I really want to talk about these tires because in 2018 most of the bikes came with 2.6 inch wide tires. So this is a Minion DHF 2.6 in the front, and in the rear there used to be a 2.6 Recon. Now what hasn't changed is all these tires are exo casings. Now exo casings are nice and lightweight. They're awesome for just, like what I'm doing right here, trail riding. What they're not awesome for is racing enduro, because my Recon in the rear had 4 massive punctures that I could not even sew together again, which is why I'm now on a 2.5 inch double down. But for 2019 all the bikes are moving towards 2.4 inch tires. Now the frame and the fork obviously still accept anything up to 2.8, so you can definitely play with sizing, but what I noticed is going with 2.5 in the rear, it does actually drop the bottom bracket quite a lot, because there's just not as much sidewall on a 2.5 as on a 2.6, which is, I guess, why for the 2019 model with 2.4 inch tires they added 10 millimeters of suspension to bring everything up again. Now the frame is still the same, they just added 10 millimeters in the front, so you're now at 160 millimeters of travel in the front, and in the rear you get 150 on anything but the small size. So on the small it's still 140 millimeters of travel. Given that I'm not really going to talk about specs, let's go into more detail on the frame. So what I really like is in the front there is a steer stopper, so when you do inevitably crash, your handlebars or your brakes won't slam into your frame. Of course means you can't do bar spins, but I can't do those anyway. But what's really weird to me is that this is a really low top tube, and I don't think the brake can possibly slam into that, so you might as well remove it if you do want to, throw some bars. Another thing I wanted to talk about is this little box here. Now I kind of bought this box as a joke, because it was like having your little lunchbox with you. However, the amount of stuff you can actually fit in this box is pretty sad. I can fit 2 gels and my car keys in there, so don't expect to put a lot of spares in there. A multi-tool, my multi-tool doesn't even fit. A dinner tube won't fit, so it's basically a waste of money. What maybe isn't a waste of money is the double bottle holder. Now, as you can see right here, I have a fabric cageless bottle in there. But what Canyon does is they include 3 stops for it, so you can either have the bottle really low or quite up high, and then depending on that you can get a different length bottle. However, I must say my bottle doesn't go all the way down in the lowest mode, and in the highest attachment point it doesn't clear the shock. Anyway, with that out of the way, we'll talk about suspension kinematics. Canyon makes a really big deal about the triple phase suspension, it being supple at first, so you have great small bump sensitivity. It's then stable for railing turns, and then it gets really progressive towards the end of the stroke, effectively describing the perfect suspension as apparently they have on their Sender, the Spectral, and the new Torque, the new Strive as well now. So is that really true in real life? Well, I have to say that I did notice a difference in small bump sensitivity between the bigger tires, 2.6s, and now going to something smaller like a 2.5. But there is definitely a lot of suppleness in that initial stroke of the suspension. The part I perhaps don't agree with so much is that stable mid-stroke. I personally find that I blow through the mid-stroke quite easily, which is why I run slightly higher pressures than I should. I'm only running just over 20% sag at the rear. I could add more volume spacers, but those only really kick in that final progressive part of the suspension, and this progressive part is definitely there. So when you land, especially when you hook it to flat, you definitely feel that in my case at least, I blow through the first maybe 10 centimeters, but then it really ramps up. I really do like the suspension platform for descending. It's got great control over small stuff, perhaps a bit too much, so if you're on a lot of roots, it sticks to the ground quite well, even with a skinnier tire on there. And then, you know, when you're doing bigger jumps, not that I personally do bigger jumps, but when you have massive G-outs and stuff, it's really progressive enough not to bottom out. And if you do, you can just add some volume spacers or maybe increase pressure a little bit. Climbing is a different story, and it will depend on which suspension you get on the bike you buy. Mine has a lockout, but it's only a 2-position switch, so it's either open or mostly locked. And for climbing, personally I find that fine. I don't need a stupid remote, I don't even need their shapeshifter, although I'm really interested in it. I don't need it. A lockout is fine. However, that said, it just climbs well locked out. It's not fully locked out, you still get a bit of suspension, so you get some traction on more technical climbs, but it's really good enough. And then if you get even better suspension, you'll get like a triple state switch on there, so you can have a dedicated climbing mode, or even some fancier stuff depending on the build kit you get. Now, what's really interesting is that for 2018 Canyon went with just straight shocks, no piggybacks, but for 2019 they have gone to piggybacks. Is that because they added 10 millimeters of suspension travel? Perhaps, but I think it's mostly because people didn't really trust this thing, although I personally haven't really noticed the suspension overheating on descending, for example. The same goes for the front. So this bike is a 35mm stanchion, and you couldn't buy the bike with a Fox 36 on there last year. This year you can get it with a Fox 36, which, you know, if you're doing more, I guess, enduro racing or just hucking it all the time, having those slightly bigger, beefier suspension components will definitely help you. Now, talking about cooling, at the moment I'm freezing to death, but the brakes don't. So in the front is a 200mm rotor. It's fine, it's plenty of cooling on there. In the rear is a 180. I have overheated it. My rotor is nice and gold looking. Obviously it's not really a problem, but it did, you know, burn through my brake pads in the process doing a lot of bike park riding. So perhaps you want to upgrade to a 200mm in the rear as well, or just a better disc. However, the brakes on this one and on a lot of the new models are Guide R's from SRAM. I don't like them. I'm already looking into buying a pair of Hopes or maybe some Magura MT7 Pros instead, because while they provide enough stopping power, they tend to really easily overheat and they just feel really spongy. In general though, Canyon offers really nice build kit on these bikes. Mine was only 3 grand and it has a full GX Eagle and, you know, decent DT Swiss M1700 wheels, which are really easy to get tubeless, by the way. A final thing I wanted to talk about with this bike is Canyon's way of doing integrated cable management. I know every reviewer has already talked about this, and Canyon in their press stuff also talks about this a lot, but they have a really clever way of getting nice and clean cabling, but still having it really easy to access for the end user without running a bunch of magnets and trying to poke brake hoses through your frame and all that. So it's just a plastic cover which acts as a down tube protector along the entire length of your down tube, but it also hides your cables away nice and easily. It also means that if you buy those brake upgrades that I talked about, you won't have to take the caliper and the lever off of the brake hose, so you can just take the plastic off, slam a new pair of brakes on, put the plastic back on, and bob's your uncle. Anyway, that was it for my review of the Canyon Spectral CF. Hope you enjoyed it. Any questions can go below in the comment area. But I'm now going to warm up a bit and shoot some fancy B-roll, hopefully.